So I've come to the beginning of a closet door, and I'm gonna have to cut this a different way than I did the other two also. So I need a little bit of the gap here for against the wall, but then it needs to slide underneath the trim. So I made marks on all sides, and I'm gonna have to slide it in this way to get it in. So I'm gonna go down to the table saw, notch out this piece, and then install it. Alright, so I got the piece notched out. You can see here. It's kind of a rough cut, but you're not going to see it, so it'll be pretty. So I'm just going to slide this in like so, make sure I did measure right. Alright, so looks good. I still got the little gap here, which I guess doesn't matter that much. But now I have to decide how I'm going to get this to click together. I'm going to try to just hammer it in without having to trim that tongue of the existing piece, but if that doesn't work, then I'll have to trim it and put a little bit of glue. So let's see what happens. So, fortunately for me, this piece is just too long and there's too much friction. I can't get it to slide in there with just the hammer. So, I have to trim this down a little bit. Alright, let's try this again. Alright, so there we go. Now it's going to glue down, and as you can see, if I can get the camera to move over there. There's nice on all sides. So, can't even tell. It looks beautiful. Alright, so now that this piece is in, I have to figure out how to do this part of the closet, since it's going backwards from the normal direction that you're supposed to lay this stuff. So what I have to do, I just put some scrap pieces together to figure out what that first row is going to be. So I'm going to trim a piece for that first row, and then I'm going to build it up until I can connect this whole thing together. And then I'll continue this direction the normal way. So stick with us, stick with me, and I'll show you the end result. Alright, so I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do that, and I thought I was going to be able to pull it apart after I did it so I could show you, but it's not coming out now. So basically what I had to do was put each piece in backwards, and just with the pull bar and measuring it out, I was able to get everything. That last piece, I trimmed down like an inch off of it so that it has the gap. You can see it has that little gap at the edge that we need. but it looks good. I staggered it. I'm surprised how simple it was, but you would just have to, instead of sliding it at a 45, you kind of have to put the tongue underneath and then click it down. So it wasn't difficult. I'm sure if you were in a similar situation, you'd be able to figure it out. But now I'm just going to keep going like I was. Once I get over to, after the next 3 rows or so, I'm going to get back to this and I'll show you how I do it. Alright, so I'm at the other edge of the closet door, and so what I did was, kind of tell, I made this mark on the board. That's what I'm going to cut out with the saw. So how I did that was I lined it up like it was going to be once it's in, and then let's see if I can show you this. So this edge here, that's actually going to be the offset for the spacer piece that we need against the wall over here. And then this line is just inside the corner here. So when this slides all the way in, since the trim kind of tapers this way, this line will always be underneath the trim, so you won't see any cuts or anything. And then I just did the same thing over here. Cut just inside the, just a little off, but just at this corner, and then another line, which is going to be our gap. Then I slid the piece, evened it up over here, slid it up as far as it'll go, and then I put a little mark there, right where the trim starts, and then a little mark right here, so that all of this part here will be underneath, but the board itself will be underneath. So those 2 marks, and then I just measured this distance, put marks on the other end, and I took another piece of laminate and laid it out, and that gave me the straight lines for here, here, and here. So now I'm just going to go down to the table saw, cut this out, and it'll be kind of the inverse of what you saw on the other side. Alright, so I got the piece cut out, and so that's how it looks. To make the cuts like this on a table saw, I just have to make little shallow grooves all the way down, and then once there's a gap, I just kind of nick it off. So it gives this little tapered edge look on this side, but otherwise you'd have to somehow like flip it over and try not to cut too far this way or this way. So just make a bunch of little cuts in like this, and then eventually they'll be real small. You can snap them off, or you can kind of turn the piece, or just run the piece sideways in the table saw. And you can see this is all jagged and nasty, but it'll be underneath the door frame, so you won't be able to tell. Now, this one's going to be tough because I have to slide it underneath. I have to go a little bit past, so I can get it on here and then come back. So what I'm going to have to do is trim all of this with the box cutter, put some glue, slide it past, and go back in. So I won't be able to do it holding the camera, so I'll just show you the finished product. Alright, so the piece is in now. It's underneath the trim, a little bit short, but the caulking and the quarter round is going to cover all that. So slid right under there, can't even see it, and then there's our little spacer gap left. So if you do this, make sure you slide the piece past, then put the glue. You don't want to get a bunch of glue under the floor and then glue the flooring down on accident. And then if any squeezes out, just wipe it up immediately and you won't have any problems. So now I'm just going to finish the last couple rows and we'll see the finished product. Alright, I'm all done. So, floor's in. This last little bit here, we can see it's at least half the board, or close to half the board. So, I didn't get that little sliver at the end. And that whole line is nice and even because I cut the, because I trimmed down the very first row. So if I hadn't done that, because of that gap that we saw, that 1/4 inch gap, by the time I got to the end, that corner probably would have been about 1/4 inch off, and I would have had to retrim the last, I would have had to remake the last 2 pieces. And being that I have 1 board left in the box, I got kind of lucky. So, now all I got to do is put the quarter round in, put the doors back on, and I'll be done. So, stay tuned, and tomorrow morning I'll get all that done. One other thing I want to mention that I haven't really focused on is this pull bar versus using the pieces of the extra pieces of laminate to hammer it in together. If you're going to use the pull bar, make sure it's on something that's already been cut that doesn't have one of these edges like this. So this is the piece that I was using for hammering, and you can see that where I was hitting it with the hammer, it got pretty damaged. So you obviously don't want to hit a piece of laminate with the mallet, but you also don't want to put this up on a good piece of laminate that you plan to use, because the exact same thing can happen with that. So if you're going to use the pull bar, make sure it's on a piece that's already been cut, or if you have to, be real careful, just catch it on the lip here. Don't get this piece down here, because this is just fiberboard. It's real weak. This is where any strength of each. So just be real careful if you have to use it this way to make sure you tap it that way. Otherwise, use a spare piece and hammer on it in whatever direction you need to go. Welcome back, everybody. Alright, so now I'm going to start with T-molding, and then I'm going to go to the 1/4 round, and then I'll be clean up and I'll be done. So, first thing I need to do, just measure this, which most doors, 30, this is a 30 inch wide door, so it's actually a little bit more, 30 and an 1/8. So, first step is to put down this track. So I'm just going to bend a piece that's a little bit shorter than that. You don't need the whole length of the track to go the whole distance, because you're not going to see any of it. So I'm just going to do like 29 inches, just because there's a hole right here that I can use to screw into. So they have little score marks in them for easy breaking. So I'm just going to bend and snap these, and then they don't bend perfectly, so just use some pliers to get them back to where they need to be. You could cut these with a hacksaw if you wanted to, but it's not really necessary. Just bending it at the score mark is going to give you usually it'll give you this nice line, and then you just gotta work it, and then it snaps off nice and easy. Now, didn't happen on that side, obviously. So, just gonna bend it back a little bit so it's out of the way. Alright, so it's a little bit wider than it was before, but that's fine because the track will snap in the rest of the way. So, lay this down. So I made it obviously shorter than 29 inches just because of where the holes were to line up. Now, I just want to make this as even as I can across the whole thing. So, if you can tell, obviously every piece of wood over here and every piece of laminate is not necessarily the same, but you just want a little bit of a gap around the whole thing and to leave it so it's straight. So, the instructions on this T-molding say 3/16 of an inch, which is hardly anything, and there's going to be a little bit more here versus a little bit less there. It's not going to matter. So now I'm just going to cut my piece of T-molding to the distance between the door frame and snap it down in. So the T-molding comes with screws, just regular wood screws, and then also drywall anchors, which actually they're concrete anchors. And if you're drilling into a concrete subfloor, you'd have to get a masonry bit and drill a hole. But since this is wood, it's real simple just to drive them into the subfloor. Alright, so now just measure again. It's going to be 30 3/16. Get it cut. So, tight. One. Now, if you can see it, this little track this little groove is going to click into this track that I just laid. So, alright, now you got a nice even transition between the laminate and the hardwood, and although it's a different color, I wasn't going to rip up this nice pretty hardwood, but the carpet had to go. So now the transition's in, nice and tight, and we're ready for the quarter round. Now all I have to do is go around. I'm going to cut off the underlayment that's sticking out around the whole perimeter of the room, and then I'll get started with the quarter round. So just take a utility knife, box cutter, and cut. This stuff goes pretty easily. And if you can't get it to cut, you just tuck it underneath and it'll be hidden by the quarter round. Alright, so now I've gone and trimmed around the whole room the underlayment. So now we're just right up to the baseboard. Now, if you are going to be putting in new baseboard, it's recommended that you let the underlayment go up the wall an inch or so, and then the trim just push over it. I didn't do that in this case just because the quarter round's only 3/4 of an inch thick, and I didn't want to try to measure 3/4 of an inch up the wall. It doesn't really make that big of a difference, but it's better for sealing the room if you're going to do it that way, sealing underneath it. So luckily this room is pretty much just 90-degree corners, nothing weird, no weird angles. So I'm going to go through and lay the quarter round and show you the finished product. I'm going to do a separate video on how to cut the quarter round, just because I'm running out of time here with this job. So stay tuned and you'll see the finished product. It'll be all cleaned up and nice and pretty. Alright, welcome back everybody. And the floor is complete. So just pan around the room a little. Now, so the quarter round's been installed. It's in the closet. Put the doors back. Cleaned up all the mess. I'll zoom in on some of this floor here so you can see that it makes nice close lines. Can't see any gaps. There will be a little bit of sawdust or debris can get caught in there, but just zip it out suck it out with the shop vac. One thing I like doing with the quarter round, I'll show you here, is when it comes to like a door, instead of just cutting it off flat, I like to make these little end caps, but I'll make a separate video on how I make those. So I really like this floor. The only negatives I'd say I have about it is I do feel a little bit of squishiness, but it's a little bit, I mean, it's a good give, and it provides a little bit of sound dampening. And but besides that, it looks really nice. It's really easy to lay down, and I would highly recommend it for any do-it-yourselfer out there. So all I really have left to do now is fill in the nail holes with some caulk and clean up the floor with a nice, like a wet mop or something, and I'll be all finished. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I was able to teach you a trick or two when you go to do your own job. If you have any questions, please comment below, and please subscribe. Thanks a lot.